Hello and greetings, Sunday School family. Welcome to another edition of Online Sunday School, brought to you by New Mount Calvary Missionary Baptist Church, which we're under the pastoral leadership of Reverend Dr. Sandra R. Dawson. Today is Thursday, and you know every Thursday at this time, we bring you the lesson of the week. Hello, Sister Vicki. Thank you for joining us. Make sure that you join us and that you chat. You get into the chat. Make sure that you give us some likes, some hearts, smash the thumbs up button on YouTube, and make sure that you subscribe to our channel so that you can get all the content that the Mount has to offer. Before we get into our lesson today, let's start off with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you. We come to you thanking you for all of your love, your blessings, and mercy. We come to you and asking you to open our ears and our hearts that we may digest this lesson and have a new revelation. Thank you for teaching us and showing us the examples of obedience and trust and faith. As we go through this lesson, bless all that hear, bless all that will be on the replay. And we ask this in your wonderful Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. So today's lesson is a good one. It's a familiar character, and it is Noah builds an altar. Noah builds an altar. Our focal scriptures are coming out of Genesis chapter 8, verses 13 through 22. Our devotional reading is Psalm 77, 1 through 2, and verses 7 through 19. And the devotional reading it talks about the theme of we're comforted through hard times by remembering God's help in the past, recalling his miracles and his previous works. That can help us, give us the courage to continue. So today's focus, like I said, is going to be in Genesis 8 and verses 13 through 22. And what we're going to be talking about, we're going to first analyze what happened with Noah after leaving the ark. And then we're going to talk about God's promises, his covenant. Okay? Our key verse today is Genesis 9:13, and it reads, I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Now, I mentioned covenant earlier, and so let's go ahead and define what is a covenant. A covenant is an agreement between two people or two groups that involve promises on the part of each other to the other. And they can be conditional or unconditional. Now, when we're speaking about divine covenants, of course, we're talking about those that have been issued by God. And they have three components. All divine components, they originate from God. And we can find that in Genesis 9:9. And all covenants are everlasting. And they are memorialized with a visible sign, as you'll see in today's lesson, what the sign of the covenant was. Now, for three questions for us to consider today. The first being, what was Noah's initial action after leaving the ark? Second, what was God's response to Noah's offering? And third, what were God's unconditional promises to Noah and all creation? And why are they still relevant? Let's talk about a little overview. So basically, we're talking about after the flood. So we're going to be talking about the stages, how Noah navigated during the post-flood, which is one of the most historical times in biblical history. And then the renewal of life. Because of the catastrophic flood, all life was gone. Everything, every living creature. And then we're going to have this transition from chaos to order. So to continue with our lesson context and background, we have the book of Genesis, which is the book of beginnings. It was the beginning of creation, the beginning of humanity, and it's also when the introduction of sin took place. Now, last week's lesson, when we talked about the offerings of Cain and Abel, Well, we know that Cain killed his brother Abel, and sin became extremely prominent after Cain murdered Abel. If we look at chapter 5, humanity grew, right? They were fruitful and they multiplied, but so did sin. And if we drop to chapter 6, in verses 5 through 8, we see that wickedness prevailed, and the Lord now he becomes regretful that he created that humanity became were such failures, and he was troubled in his heart. By the time we get to verses 11 and 12, the world is so corrupt and just full of violence, and God just had enough. So in Genesis 7, the great flood, God's judgment reigned on earth. For our lesson aims, our first aim our first aim is to summarize the terms of the Lord's covenant with Noah. Our second aim is to list the reasons why Noah's sacrifice pleased God. And our third aim is to identify why Noah's first act was to build an altar. Okay? For our lesson outline, it's broken into 3 sections today. The first being a dry land, and that's in verses 18 through 22. Then we'll move to our second section, which is an altar, which is Genesis 8, 18 through 22. And our final section is an agreement, which is Genesis 9, 11 through 13. So let's begin with our reading, starting with verse 13. By the first day of the first month of Noah's 601st year, the water had dried up from the earth. Noah then removed the covering from the ark and saw that the surface of the ground was dry. By the 7th day of the second month, the earth was completely dry. Then God said to Noah, "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on earth and be fruitful and increase in number on it." So in our first sections, we see that, first of all, we know that the flood had occurred. It had rained 40 days and 40 nights, and they were on the ark. And Noah had commanded, God had commanded Noah to bring 2 of each animal of every kind on the animal, along with his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. The Lord looked at Noah as a righteous man. And so they're on the ark, and now the storm is over, and they are a rest up upon a mountain. I believe it's Mount Ararat. And they're on this ark for over a year. But then they actually were on the ark more than a year. They were on the ark for probably 2 months more before the ground was actually dry. And at this time, Noah is 600 years old. 601 years old. Now, once the earth completely dried, God commanded Noah to come out. He commanded him to leave the ark with his family and all living creatures. Why? So that they could repopulate the earth, right? That was one of the blessings. This was like a second Genesis, a new beginning. So now let's go on to our next section, which is an altar. And Noah went forth, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, and whatsoever creepeth upon the earth after their kinds, went forth out of the ark. And Noah built an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I smite any more everything living, as I have done. While the earth remaineth seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night, shall not cease. So the first act, as we see right here, is the family. Noah's family and all living things, they leave the ark. Everything with life leaves the ark. They and then Noah builds an altar, and he uses, remember, there are clean animals. Now, as we learned in our previous lessons, this predates the law. This predates the Mosaic law when they actually did burnt offerings and sin offerings. But you notice that this sets the stage for that law to be set because it was a sweet aroma to God. So, but what was the Lord's response to Noah? The Lord was pleased. God was pleased with his offering. It was a sweet aroma. And as a result, the Lord promised never to curse the ground or destroy anything living, all living things and creatures. So he also promised that he would restore order. So there would be days and nights, cold and heat. So the world basically got a reset. It's not a new creation, but a reset because everything was created. But now life, there was a renewal for life. God has complete control, this reminds us, and power over the earth. And what's so significant about Noah building the ark is that it shows his act of gratitude. He demonstrated his deep gratitude and reverence toward God. And it also shows restoration. It was the renewal of the bond between God and humanity. And what does that mean? It brings us hope and redemption. So now let's move on to our last section, which is an agreement. And I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off. Any cold and any heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. More by the waters of a flood. Neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. So God tells Noah an agreement. We talked about at the beginning what a covenant is. It's agreement between two people, right? And what happens? He establishes this covenant and he promises never, never to destroy life by a flood again. So God assures us that there will never be a flood to destroy the earth, and especially because of man's sin. He would not punish them that way. The sign of the covenant is what? The rainbow. The rainbow is the sign of the covenant between God and the earth, not just with Noah, but with all generations and all people to come. Our supporting scriptures for today. Then 2 Peter 3, verses 6 and 7. Then he used the water to destroy the ancient world with the mighty flood. And by the same word, the present heavens and earth have been stored up for fire. They are being kept for the day of judgment, when ungodly people will be destroyed. And then Genesis 6:22. This is why God chose Noah. So Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him. Look at this. When you see a rainbow, remember his goodness, his faithfulness, his promises, and his covenant. Which one of these means the most to you? Go ahead, write it in the chat. If it's all three, write all three. Goodness, faithfulness, promises, and covenant. When we look at our life application, we need to reflect. We need to reflect on our own history with God and the times that he has shown us kindness. We need to reflect on the deep connection and responsibilities humanity humanity has toward God and the world. And we need to reflect on faith. Look at Noah's faith. God told him and gave him instructions to build an ark, right? They didn't even know it rained. Rain had never occurred, but he did it. He was obedient. And we need to reflect on the aspect of God's nature, emphasizing his justice and his mercy. We need to reflect on God's character. We also need to reflect on being great stewards of all that God has given us. So when we look at us in summary, when we look at this, we have the Noahic covenant, the covenant that he made with Noah. And what was that consisting of? That he would never curse the ground, despite humanity's failures, despite humanity's propensity towards evil. He would never again send a universal flood to act as a divine judgment. And also, he would never disrupt the natural cycle of days, of nights, and weeks, and months, and seasons, and years. He would not disrupt the order of the world. So every time you see a rainbow, it should remind you of three things and what it represents: that God is faithful and trustworthy, that we never have to fear the world being destroyed by a universal or global flood again. And it should also remind us of God's mercy and how he is gracious to those who are obedient and seek to worship him in spirit and in truth. See, rain, if you think about it, is a sign of God's mercy. So for our closing thought and question today, the thought being, learn to wait, learn to act. Wait for God's command and then obey it. You see, God spoke, Noah listened, and then Noah acted. So if you understand this and this resonates with you, go ahead and write. Learn to wait and learn to act. But most of all, be obedient. Be obedient. And the question I leave you with is this. Oh, that's not the question. But the question I should leave you with is this. When you next time you see a rainbow, what will you remember about God? What will that rainbow, what does it represent and mean to you? Well, that concludes the preview for this week. See, God's covenant in Noah was with Noah, but also with all creation. And it marks a pivotal moment in biblical history. It's the assurances of creation, and those assurances about the future of creation, which highlights God's faithfulness and his mercy, and the significance of God's promises, which signify hope and stability for us and the natural world. Well, next week, we're going to move on with another covenant. Well, not a covenant, but we're going to move on with another person that's in the hall of faith. And that's Abraham makes an offering. And that's going to be in Genesis. And we're going to look at chapters 22, verses 1 through 14. Our devotional reading is going to come out of the book of Romans. And our lesson focuses, give God your devotion, especially when you don't understand. Well, that concludes the preview for this week. Please remember to like and share. Make sure that you come back next week for that powerful lesson about Abraham. And until we meet again, stay blessed.